All right, welcome everyone to the CFA program information session hosted by Kaplan Schweser. My name is Brian Stipe. I'm the segment sales director for advanced designations here at Kaplan, and I'll be the MC/moderator for today's event. Today, our main speaker, Mr. Jonathan Bone, will be reviewing all things CFA, including the value of the CFA charter, qualifications necessary to become a CFA charter holder, exam details and what the candidate experience now looks like. He'll be sharing time-tested strategies to pass the CFA exam with the help of Kaplan Schweser study packages, of course, and how to get started, including the new exam windows and which study package is right for you. If you have any questions, please use the question function within the GoToWebinar video window. I'll be monitoring these during John's talk, and we'll either interrupt him or save these until the end. If you still have questions that we're not able to address today, you can follow up with us directly, and we'll do our best to answer your questions in a timely manner. On a quick note, we are recording this session and we'll share the video with you after the event. The slides that John will be presenting will not be available, however. And now today's speaker, Mr. Jonathan Bone, CFA and ACA. Jonathan graduated from University College London with an economics degree and went on to qualify as a chartered accountant before moving into corporate finance roles. Jonathan joined the financial markets team as a lecturer in 2001 while gaining the CFA designation. He has considerable experience teaching both exam-based training and non-exam-based courses for leading financial clients. Jonathan is currently Executive Director of Product Management for Kaplan Schweser and is responsible for all aspects of material, course design, and delivery. He also has global recognition as one of the core tutors in the Kaplan Schweser video series and plays a key role in developing tailored courses for clients' graduate development programs. Jonathan, the virtual floor is all yours.
Thank you very much, Brian. Hi there, guys. First of all, just note that you've got my email address here, and if any questions come to you that you haven't asked during the presentation, do feel free that you can email me to get the answers. Okay, let's talk about what we're going to talk about. We're going to first of all cover a little bit about what the CFA is, and then get into some of the kind of details. How do you register for the exam? What's the kind of type of exam that you'll be doing? And very importantly for you guys, of course, what pass rates are like globally. Then we'll get a bit more into Kaplan Schweser. We'll talk about our products, but we'll also talk about learning methodology. What works for the CFA exam? You hear all the time 300 hours, 300 hours of study for the CFA exam. We'll touch on that briefly. Where does it come from? Well, it's the average number of hours that CFA candidates take to study a level of the CFA. But reality is, you could study 300 hours, and if it's inefficient, you're still not going to be prepared for that exam. So we'll talk about what techniques work, what techniques don't work for the CFA exams. Okay, so here is the CFA Institute, and of course they are the providers of the designation, the CFA qualification itself. Now, actually, the CFA qualification dates back to the 60s, and it was the very famous value-led investor Benjamin Graham that essentially developed the CFA. Logic was, if you went to a doctor for a medical ailment, you would expect that doctor to have the proper credentials, proper qualifications. But there was nothing in the finance industry that really gave people a proper qualification. And Ben Graham essentially said, well, look, if you go to a fund manager or an advisor, you would expect them too to have the proper qualifications, and hence the CFA designation was born, and it enjoyed solid growth in the 60s, but really started to accelerate into the 90s and into the new millennium. Now you can see it's the highest distinction in the investment management profession. So the good news is there aren't really any qualifications that are above this CFA designation, certainly in terms of difficulty. So it's still seen as the gold standard. You might hear that phrase, gold standard. It was a phrase that the Economist, the journal The Economist, gave to the CFA designation. So at the moment, we've got 178,000 professionals in the CFA network. So these are people that have taken all 3 levels of the CFA, and you have to take all 3 levels. There's no exemptions at all during that process. So for example, my background, I have an ACA, a Chartered Accountancy qualification, very similar to a CPA in the US. Now, did that mean I didn't have to do the financial statement analysis questions in the CFA? No, it didn't. There is no exemptions at all, regardless of any other qualifications that you may hold. Good news is, of course, if you do hold some other qualifications, it may well make your path through the CFA qualification and exams a little bit easier. So you need to pass all 3 levels sequentially and then join the CFA Institute. You need to have relevant work experience, 4 years of work experience. So what is I often get asked about CFA versus MBA. Now, of course, MBA, very prestigious qualification, but it really depends on where you gained it from. In other words, not all MBAs are created equally. Now, the news with CFA, of course, is no matter where you sit it in the world, you are studying the same curriculum and being tested on the same material. So it is standardized, and as a result, investment institutions tend to prefer it to an MBA. Also, of course, it's more focused. It's focused on predominantly sell-side activities and buy-side activities in financial markets, whereas an MBA, of course, is a far more generalist qualification. This just gives you a little idea about charter holders and where do they work or what do they work. I think probably the most interesting one is to look at the one on the right-hand side where we can see the job roles. Now, CFA was designed originally to cater for 2 groups of people, really: portfolio managers, so the buy side, and really analysts, predominantly on the sell side, essentially. And you can see it's still dominated by those 2 activities. You've got portfolio manager there, 23%, analyst 16%, but it's expanded so much further than that. So, for example, when I took my designation, I was working in corporate finance. So I would have been in that small 5% there for corporate finance analyst. So it certainly has grown from its original focus purely on buy and sell side. Right, okay, so as we said, to gain the charter, first of all, to enter the program, you have to meet the education requirement. The education requirement is that you have an undergraduate degree or relevant work experience. You can look at if you haven't got that undergraduate degree, you can look at the CFA Institute's website to see what that relevant work experience is. So first of all, you have to meet the education requirement. Worth mentioning, if you are a university candidate, you can take level 1 whilst you are waiting to gain your undergraduate qualification, but you cannot progress to levels 2 and 3 until you've received your undergraduate qualification. Okay, so you need to meet the education requirement to enter the program. You then need to pass levels 1, 2, and 3 sequentially, and as we mentioned, there are no exemptions to this. You also need to achieve 4,000 hours of qualified work experience, and that work experience needs to be related to the investment industry. Okay. Now, does it matter whether you have the 4,000 hours before taking the exams or after taking exams or during taking the exams? No, it doesn't. Okay, so you can do those 2 things consecutively. So you achieve the 4,000 hours of qualified work experience, then apply to the Institute to gain your CFA charter. Okay, so let's talk about registration fees and dates, because they've been moving around a lot recently. And we've been moving to a computer-based testing platform for CFA. Prior to 2021, the CFA exams were pen and paper exams held in massive exhibition centres all around the world. And it was kind of cool because you got to see the size of the CFA exam when you just saw rows and rows and rows of desks stretching out in these exhibition centres. I took mine in London. You might be able to guess from the accent. These days, it's computer-based testing centres and it's prometric. It does have some advantages in as much as there's now more exam sittings throughout a calendar year. Basic rule of the CFA is your syllabus is static for a calendar year. Okay, so it doesn't change between the sittings during a calendar year, but once we go over a calendar year, then they may well be introducing changes to the syllabus. In fact, roughly speaking, about 10% of the syllabus changes every calendar year. Now, I've got dates in there for August 2022 and November 2022 exam dates. As you can see, level 1 is actually offered in every exam window, so August, November, February, and May. But level 2, we actually have 2 bites of the cherry this year in August and November, and level 3 is August only in 2022. Now you can see in February 2023, then we're going to get level 1 and 3. May 2023, you'll get level 1 and 2. Now, all of the dates about the February 2023 exams and May 2023 exams have yet to be released by the CFA Institute, so we haven't got any details on those yet. I would expect the February 2023 information about when registration opens, etc., to be released very, very shortly. Okay, now what I would say is there are 2 fees that you essentially pay the CFA Institute. First of all, a $450 enrollment fee. That just gets you into the program. What you then pay is an exam entry fee every time you take a paper. And you might see down there's an early registration date and a standard registration date. So early registration, if you get it in before that date, you're going to pay $700 for your exam. And if you miss that date, so for example, for the August 2022 sitting, it's February the 9th. So that date essentially has already gone. You've missed early registration, but you've still got until May the 3rd for standard registration. But notice that costs you an extra $300. So it's $1,000 there. I would say with these fees, just know that they are changing in 2023. So the one-off enrollment fee that you pay, that $450 that you pay up front, you only pay it once, well, that actually drops to $350 in 2023, but the exam entry fees, they're going to increase. So the early registration fee is going from $700 to $900, and the standard registration is going from $1,000 to $1,200 in 2023. Other little dates to note there, scheduling window. It's a 2-step process to register for your exams. First of all, you register with the CFA Institute, and then you essentially schedule an exam day with Prometric, which are the hosts of the CFA computer-based tests. And you can see those scheduling windows are essentially how long you've got to book your appointment with Prometric. Then the exam window at the bottom is actually when the exams are taking place. Okay, so some useful information. As I said, that data is all correct. It says of the 19th of April, but I actually did check it today. It's all still valid as of today's date. So in 2022 and 2023, you are dealing with computer-based testing rather than pen and paper exams. And it does have big advantages. There is more flexibility. In other words, it used to be that you had to take your exam on the first Saturday in June for most of the sittings. And level 1 also had a secondary sitting in the first Saturday in December. But you had to do it on that date. So if Saturdays weren't good for you, well, tough luck. These days, you've got multi-day exam windows, so you can book a date that actually fits with you. Other big advantage of this is it makes the exams more robust, given the kind of situations that we've been seeing recently, things like COVID, which essentially shut down the 2020 examinations. Here, of course, because this test centres are much smaller, it gives the CFA Institute much more flexibility. Now, with the shift to computer-based testing, the exam has got slightly shorter, which is quite nice. So you used to have 2 papers in the old paper-based exam, and they were 120 questions in total. You've now still got 2 sessions, but there's only 90 questions in them. Okay, so you've got 90 questions in a paper and 135 minutes, which boils down to about 1.5 minutes per question at level 1. So notice how your exam goes. You have a 30-minute tutorial on how the software works. Again, if you're a Kaplan Schweser student, you will have been using our exam emulators, so you will know how the software works by the time you go in there. And then you take your pledge. This is your pledge to the CFA Institute, basically about exam integrity and what you will and won't do as a CFA member. You've then got the actual exam, 135 minutes for session 1. Okay, and in session 1, you're going to have all of the ethics questions grouped together. You then have quants, economics, and financial reporting analysis or financial statement analysis, but those questions are mixed up. So you might get one quant question, the next question might be financial statement analysis, the next question might be economics. Okay, at the end of the first paper, session 1, you then can take a 30-minute break if you want, and then start session 2. In session 2, We're going to have portfolio management questions and corporate finance questions, and those are going to be mixed up together. And then you're going to have your asset valuation based questions. So these are going to be equity, fixed income, derivatives, alternative investments, and those again are all mixed up together. And you can see your total testing time comes down to about 4.5 hours, with your actual exams being, or your two papers being, 135 minutes long. Now, as we saw on the previous slide when we were looking at the exam windows, there are 4 exam windows a year: February, May, August, and November. And remember, the syllabus is static within that calendar year. Now, one rule they do have, though, is you must wait a minimum of 6 months between exams. That means either if you pass or fail, you have to wait 6 months until you either reset or you move on to take the next level of the CFA exams. So in 2022, level 1 was offered in all windows. Of course, the only ones that are valid are August and November because they're still open. Level 2 was offered in February. That's gone and passed, but there's August and November exams, and level 3 will be May and August. 2023, notice we've got a little bit of a shift here. Level 1, again, is still all windows. Level 2 is going to be May, August, and November, and level 3 shifts to February and August. Notice a little bit of a difference there with the 2022 dates. So they've been settling down into this computer-based format. So let's have a look at how the exams stack up: level 1, level 2, and level 3. Level 1, you're facing 180 multiple choice questions, 90 in session 1, 90 in session 2. Each question has an A, B, or C answer. There is no negative marking in the exam, so you are not penalized for guessing, essentially. Exam results availability: typically 60 days after you take the exam, you'll get your results. Now, you might think, well, that's very long for a computer-based exam, but it's to do with how the CFA Institute set what's called the minimum passing score. And that's the mark you need to achieve in order to get a pass at each level. They use something called a modified Aganorth method, which basically means that they are making sure the difficulty of the exam is consistent between exams. Okay, so everybody has the same level of difficulty in their exam. Other qualifications work slightly differently. So things like KIA and FRM, they will have a set amount of people that they want to pass, and that determines, therefore, the pass mark. Not with CFA, it's all about making the exam standardized in terms of difficulty, period to period, which is why it takes a little longer to get your results back. Reported hours of study, these come from the CFA exit surveys. This is where the CFA Institute interview on a sample basis a number of candidates and ask them how many hours they studied. And this is where that number 300 hours comes from. I hate it. I hate it because it gives candidates the idea that there's some kind of magical number that they can study, and then, yeah, the CFA exams will be all right. And that is just not true. As I mentioned before, 300 hours of inefficient study, well, you're still not going to be prepared for the exam. However, if you are efficient, and certainly if you've got prior experience of some of the subject matter, you can, in particular at level 1, get away with much less than 300 hours. So, for example, my background is econ degree, so that was quant and economics sorted. I have the accountancy qualification, so that was financial statement analysis sorted. I worked in corporate finance, so I was happy with things like cash flow valuation, etc. So I'd seen an awful lot of the CFA syllabus before, and as a result, I got away with much less than 300 hours. Now, no, I didn't at levels 2 and levels 3. So there's always a danger that some candidates can shortcut level 1. They get away with much less than the 300 hours. They therefore think, well, that's fabulous. That's, that means I can whiz through these exams. They then start their level 2 studies too late and then find actually they needed 300 hours at levels 2. You'll notice the hours go up, but of course the quality of candidates are rising as well as we move through the 3 levels. Basic logic is the CFA Institute tells us about 1 in 5 people that start the CFA process actually obtain the charter, okay? And the average number of attempts for a CFA charter holder is 5. In other words, 2 fails en route to gaining or passing the 3 levels of CFA is the norm. And that's the norm for charter holders. And we've already said only 1 in 5 makes it to charter. Okay, so it seems a little bit scary. I'm going to touch on pass rates on another slide. So level 1 standalone questions, and level 1 is really a generalist level. It's trying to give you background financial knowledge. Then we move to level 2. Level 2, often seen as the hardest level of the CFA exams, and it's got a focus on valuation. So it's more of a sell-side based exam. And what we come across at level 2 is item set based exam. Here you get a series of information and then 4 to 6 related questions on that information. It means because there's more to read in the exam, you have less questions. You're going to see about 90 questions in total, okay? But that actually makes the exam harder at level 2 because not everything that you study is going to be tested at level 2. Now, there isn't really a particular difficulty step up between levels 2 and levels 3. What we've really got there is a change in focus. Level 2 really focusing on sell side and valuation. Level 3 typically focusing on fund management, portfolio construction. Now notice we've got 2 types of questions there. We've got vignette supported constructed response and multiple choice questions. In other words, there's a written element. This constructed response is a written element. I say it's written, it's now typed, of course, because it's computer-based exams. And that's paper 1 of the level 3. And then in the afternoon of the level 3 or session 2 of the level 3, you move to the item sets of level 2, so information and then multiple choice questions relating to that information. Okay, so level 1, general financial information. Level 2, we move to sell side and valuation. Level 3, we move to portfolio management. Typically, candidates do find a step up in difficulty between level 1 and level 2, but don't really report much of a change in difficulty between level 2 and level 3. And in fact, some candidates really feel that level 3 is easier than level 2. Okay, although my level 3 tutors are constantly telling me that level 3 is the hardest level, I don't essentially believe them necessarily. Right, okay, so let's have a quick look at knowledge and or the 3 levels. You can see ethics is across all 3 levels. This is how you will behave in financial markets, of course. Absolutely no irony about American investment bankers teaching us about ethics. Right, let's have a look at level 1. It's the general basic information. It's stuff that you may well have covered on other courses. And that's why the number of hours to complete level 1 is going to be so variable between candidates. So you've got statistics in there, quantitative methods, econ, basic micro, macro, and a bit of foreign exchange, financial reporting analysis, understanding balance sheets, income statements, with a huge focus on ratios there. Corporate issues is really corporate finance, so looking at dividends, debt, issuances, debt theories, etc. in there as well. And then we get into our investments. So we've got a little bit of equity investment here, and the equity investments really breaks down into 2. We've got one part of it that is focusing on markets, okay, and the second part is really focusing on evaluation methodology for stocks. We don't really encounter the detailed valuation methodology for equity until we hit the level 2 syllabus. So if you're desperate to sink your teeth into free cash flow valuation, well, you will do, but not really until you get to level 2. Fixed income, reportedly the hardest area of the level 1 syllabus. That's what the CFA Institute tell us. They tell us that candidates underperform on fixed income and financial reporting analysis at level 1. Very computational at a level 1 fixed income. So whether you're going to like this or not is really going to depend on whether you feel comfortable mathematically. Now, people get very worried about the level of maths required for CFA. Basic idea is as long as you can rearrange equations, you are good to go at level 1, 2, and 3. At no point are we going to delve into maths where we have to integrate or differentiate or anything nasty like that. Okay, so the mathematics pretty just basically being able to basically rearrange formulas is about as hard as it gets in the exam. We have a little dip into derivatives and alternative investments, really descriptions of our major types of derivatives, futures, forwards, options, and swaps. And then we finish up level 1 with portfolio management, and it's really an introduction to modern portfolio theory. So it touches on the works of Harry Markowitz and diversification of risk, then moves into the work of Sharpe and the development of the capital asset pricing model. Now, as I said, Level 2 is where all of our valuation calculations really reside. So if you're interested in Black-Scholes-Merton for valuing options, well, you're going to find it, but you're going to find it in the Level 2 syllabus rather than the Level 1 syllabus. Okay, I'm not going to go into the detail of the Level 2 and Level 3 curriculum because, let's face it, you're not going to remember it by the time you get to Level 2 and Level 3. But remember, Level 2, valuation. Level 3, everything is in a portfolio context, okay? So even when we talk about fixed income and equity, it's from a portfolio context. How do we use them within a portfolio? Right, let's talk about pass rates. These are the pass rates as they stand. 2020 was the last paper-based exam, so we've got a kind of cut-off at this point here. Oops, sorry, there we go, cut-off here, and it's computer-based testing from that point onwards. Now let's talk about Level 1, because of course that's what you're probably interested in, and you'll notice that in the old paper-based exams, when there was a June and December-based paper, the pass rate bubbled around mid-40s, really, mid-40s. That 49 was rather exceptional there. Notice June 2020, not applicable. Well, that was completely cancelled due to COVID. So we then move into 2021 and 2022, and this is when we get to the computer-based testing exams. And it started off 44% in line with previous years. And then notice these plunges, 25, 26, 27. And this caused kind of mass hysteria amongst CFA candidates. The exams are getting harder since we've moved to computer-based testing. Now, what the CFA Institute came out and said essentially was, it doesn't appear that the exams are getting harder. It's to do with people being deferred due to cancellations due to COVID, and essentially experienced study burnout. So what happened is, if your exam was cancelled in 2020, you could re-register for free at any point in 2021. So we had a lot of people, therefore, delaying and postponing their exams. And the CFA Institute noted a correlation. The bigger the length of the deferment period someone had taken, and the more deferments they'd had, then the smaller the rate of passing. So actually, these 25, 26, 27 was to do with this exam fatigue, according to the CFA Institute. Now, I kind of slightly buy that. I think that's certainly true. But I think as well, the minimum passing score for Level 1 has gone from the mid-60s up to this about 70% for Level 1. And if you're interested in that kind of detail, you can look at a website called 300hours.com, and they try and analyze the minimum passing scores. So it does look like the minimum passing score has risen, and the only reason that could rise is if the actual questions being asked in the exam were slightly easier. Now, there is some good news. The CFA Institute said deferrals will have filtered through the system by the time we get into 2022. So we were all expecting, therefore, to see an improvement in pass rates in 2022. And lo and behold, we have. We're not quite back to the old paper-based exams, but it does show an improvement. It's moving in the right direction. What does this really mean for you? Well, really what I would say, and again, remember, I don't like that 300 hours. 300 hours is the average number of hours studied by a CFA candidate at Level 1. Well, let's have a look at these pass rates. The average candidate doesn't pass. Okay, the pass rates are lower than 50% and always have. So basing yourself on the average candidate, not great. Also, average candidate, are you cleverer than the average candidate, or are you less clever than the average candidate? By definition, if we assume intelligence of candidates is a normal distribution, some of you, in fact 50% of you, are going to be below the mean and therefore needed more than 300 hours. Of course, problem is we never like to think it's us that is below the mean in intelligence. Okay, so just be aware, those are your results. These are global results. These are anybody that has essentially entered the exam, registered for an exam sitting. Whether they showed up to the exam centre, well, these are only the ones that showed up. If you didn't show up to the exam centre, you're not included in these. Right, okay, so now really what I want to do is talk about study methodology. How do we get you through these exams, and what study techniques work and what study techniques do not work? And this applies to you whether you're using Kaplan Schweser material, the CFA Institute's material, or any other prep provider. So these are going to be just truisms that I have noticed with CFA candidates. And I've been preparing people to pass these exams now, I think Brian said I joined Kaplan in 2001. So where are we now? 2022. So I've been doing it for 21 years. So I've got a pretty good idea about what works, and even more importantly, what doesn't work. Where are the big mistakes you can make? And some of the mistakes are very, very common indeed. Right, time management. Well, there you go. It takes 300 hours to prepare for each exam. I am a bit dubious about that. It takes on average 300 hours to prepare for each exam. Okay, we could say that, but that doesn't necessarily equate to a pass. And remember, with level 1, it's a massive difference between candidates depending on their background. If you've seen the material before, level 1 can often be relatively simple and straightforward. If you haven't seen any of the material before in other studies, then you're going to find that it takes more than 300 hours. Okay, motivation, that's a big one for the CFA. It's very easy to start off your studies, but can you motivate yourself over a 6-month period? And I would be giving myself 6 months per level as really a minimum on this. Now, if you give yourself 6 months per level, if you say, well, let's pretend that 300 hours does apply to you, to get close to 300 hours, you're studying for about 15 hours per week. Okay, so that is at least kind of 2 or 3 evenings or mornings plus 1 day at the weekend. Okay, and it's important that you structure your studies so you do have time for your social life and your work-life balance. This is the challenge of the CFA exams, okay, compared to university exams. You've got a job and you're trying to balance these exams, which are pretty much as intense as 1 year in an undergraduate course, each level of the CFA, on top of that. So you're balancing work, social life, and studies, and that's what makes the exams hard. Level 1, you're not going to see any material in there that blows your socks off. It's not outrageously difficult. But boy, there is a huge amount of it. Okay, so it's really important to be disciplined. It's really important to keep up with your studies, with your study plan, to make sure that you're going to complete your studies in time. What tends to happen is people start off very fast, they keep the 15 hours up for a few weeks, and then it begins to slide. Then they do 10 hours a week, then 5 hours a week. And what's actually happening is you're building a big backlog of study, and then suddenly, rather than having to study 2 or 3 evenings and 1 day at the weekend, you're having to study most evenings and both days at the weekend, and then the walls start to close in and you start to lose your sanity. Keeping your mental sanity, okay, mental health, whilst doing these exams is very, very important. I've seen candidates really feel that the walls were closing in on them and really starting to lose their balance and their grip. And largely it's because they hadn't paced themselves correctly and they suddenly got this tsunami of material to cover and in a very short time, and it takes over their life. Using your study time efficiently, I'm not going to cover that on this slide because I'm going to talk to you about it in more detail in a second. And that's the same as practicing concepts. I will talk about that in a second. So let's talk about learning methodology. So we employ learning scientists at Kaplan, and they look at what works for study and what doesn't work for study for the CFA exams. Now, first of all, techniques that have limited or no evidence of effectiveness: reading and rereading. Okay, and this is what people do. They read the material, then they read it again, and they read it again, thinking that that's effective. Reality is, reading stuff is hugely ineffective in terms of retention. And if you want to prove this to yourself, find some kind of technical journal that you've got lying around, read a few pages of it today, and then try and remember what you read by next Monday. Trust me, you won't remember the topic, or you'll struggle to remember the topic you read, let alone the fine detail. Reading does not help in terms of understanding and retention. What it does do, though, is it creates familiarity, because you start to recognize material if you read it a lot of times. Okay, now familiarity is often confused for understanding. Okay, and the two things are not the same. Oh yeah, I recognize this material because I've read it 3 times, but do you understand it? Can you answer questions on it? That's the key. Underlining and highlighting, I know people do this, they say, oh, I'll underline this, it's an important thing. Does it help with memorization and retention? Not shown to really help. Highlighting, of course, might mean that you can read your Schweser notes in low light, but that is about it. Now, next one, summarization. And by this, I mean note-taking, taking your own notes. A huge no-no in the CFA world. Yes, you can take very brief notes, but they have to be very, very brief. What happens is people start to take detailed notes. And what they end up doing is rewriting the Schweser notes or rewriting the CFA Institute material in their own handwriting. Now, why do people do this? Now, number one, they do it because they say, that's how I memorize stuff. And the actual academic evidence, does it help for memorization and retention, is very slim. It's shown to be slightly better than rereading, but not by much. And here's the problem. Because of the size of the CFA syllabus, if you try and read and if you try and note take, you're going to be spending virtually every hour of those 15 hours per week, simply making notes. Okay, it takes too long. It takes too long. Use of imagery and for text-based learning and keyword mnemonics don't really work for CFA because CFA is not really a rote learning exam. You are not going to be memorizing stuff and then just regurgitating it in the exam. CFA exams are all about understanding and context of information and the syllabus. So simple rote learning doesn't really work for them. Okay, so I've just said don't read, don't take notes, and that's probably what you did at university. And here's a danger. What happens is, as candidates get stressed, they tend to fall back on reading and note taking because they did it at university and they achieved success at university. All very true, but very ineffective. And remember, for the CFA exams, it's all about efficiency. It's about getting bang for your buck for your studies, because you're trying to balance those pillars of work life, social life, and studying as well. So let's talk about moderately effective methods. So I kind of said don't read, but I don't really mean that. Of course, we've got to read the information, otherwise how would we know what's in the syllabus? So when you're reading, try elaborative interrogation and self-explanation. Pretty much what this means is you read a few pages in the Schweser notes or the CFA Institute's material, you shut the book or turn off the screen, and then you explain it back to yourself in your own words. Because if you can't explain what you've read back in your own words, you didn't understand it. So number one, it instantly highlights whether we understood or not, okay? And number two, rewording it in your own words, explaining it back in your own words is shown to kind of burn those neural pathways and aid recall. So in other words, close that book, explain it back to yourself. It will give you much greater benefits than simply reading on its own. Interleaved learning just means studying multiple topics, multiple subjects, rather than studying one subject at a time. Don't worry about this. You'll get this automatically when you get through to the revision or review phase. Typically, what I would suggest is you spend about 4 to 4.5 months out of your 6 months learning the syllabus, and then you leave yourself between 1.5 and 2 months at the end for the review process. And during the review process, you're going to be doing mock examinations, which test all the topics together. That will give you that interleaved learning. Why do we say interleaved learning is important? Because it's shown massively to improve performance and in particular retention. Right, distributed practice. Yes, spreading your studies over time is shown to be more effective than cramming at the last minute. As I said, cramming for the CFA is tough due to the size of the syllabus, okay, and it can have very negative impacts on your mental health. You know if you're a stress bunny or not. You know, if you're one of those people that finds that study stressful, then cramming is really not for you. Now, people also say, you know, cramming's how I learn and I've been successful in the past. Maybe, but you were successful despite cramming, not because of cramming. Spreading your learning over time is shown to improve retention. Now, finally, the number one thing you can be doing for performance is doing questions. Okay, absolutely essential. It is shown to be so much more effective than any other study tool that you have at your disposal, which is why the Schweser products contain thousands upon thousands of questions, and as well, CFA institutes have question banks as well, and we recommend that you do both the Schweser questions and the institute questions. Why is question practice so important? Well, number one, it immediately demonstrates, did you understand the material? And it's how the human brain works. We learn from mistakes. Getting a question wrong and then working out why you got it wrong is a very powerful technique for retention. Okay, much more powerful than taking notes, for example. So doing question practice, really important. I don't know why I put in test effect works with no answers provided. Well, that's what the learning scientists tell us. You'll be pleased to know that we do provide you with solutions to every single question. I also hear a lot of candidates say, I don't feel I'm ready for questions yet. To which my reply is nonsense. You are ready from questions from day one. Okay, why ready for questions from day one? Because I'm not worried about are you getting them right or wrong from day one. I just want you to do questions, and if you make mistakes, work out where the mistake was, why you made that mistake, and you will see improvement. Okay, so questions really from day one onwards. So here is the fatal mistake that candidates make all the time. Now, don't worry too much about the percentages here, but essentially the mistake is to spend or focus your studies on note-taking, watching videos, and reading, okay, the majority of your time. Okay, and actually, if anything, we need to flip it over. We need the majority of our time to be spent on question practice, okay? So at least 50% of our time during the early study phases should be question practice. If you take anything away from today's presentation, this is the one to take away. If you focus on question practice, you stand a far better chance of passing the exam. Why? Well, because you're making your mistakes outside the exam hall, okay? So hopefully when you go into the exam, you've seen similar questions before, and you go, oh yeah, I knew I added back depreciation and I should have subtracted it. Okay, well, I made that mistake once, I'm not going to make it again. So important. Yeah, effective study plan, start early, be consistent. CFA say 300 hours. I say once you can score consistently above 75% across all topic areas, okay, then you are ready for that exam. Then you should pass without any doubt, okay. Stick to your schedule, very important. Keep those studies going, otherwise you get that big snowballing effect. And remember, then you're studying not 15 hours, 20 hours, 25 hours, 30 hours a week, and those walls start to close in, and the CFA exams become a very onerous process indeed. Prepare, practice, perform. What we're really saying here is read the notes, okay, and then back it up with question practice. You must spend time on question practice. Review regularly. I like this idea. This means, you know, what I often hear, as I said, 4 months for a basic studies and then about 2 months for review. And what I hear from a lot of candidates when we get about 2 months out is, hey, I understood all of this material, but I can't remember any of it now. And they've got this panic. And that's why we say you need that 1.5 months to 2 months at the end for the review process, the revision process, okay, because you need to work on that retention. But if you're worried about retention before that, then review regularly. We have a product called Schweser Pro QBank in our packages, and that's got about 5,000 questions, and you can build custom tests on that. And I would say every couple of weeks, build yourself a test that tests everything you've studied so far, and that just keeps the knowledge ticking away, and it stops it fading so much. Cover all the material. Yes, you have to, especially you know, we say that at level 1, but it's even more important at level 2 and 3. End with ethics. Now, it used to be the first study session you came across in the Institute's material. It's now the last study session. We've always said to candidates, study it last. Ethics, it's a bit of rote learning at the end of the day. You know, basic common sense gets you through a lot of ethical questions, you know, put your customer first, basically. But then do a lot of question practice, because some of the finer details, things like, can you accept a gift or not? Well, it depends on who's giving you the gift. And you only start to build that knowledge by doing question practice. Now, notice the ethics adjustment here. If you're a marginal student, meaning you're very close to the pass mark, the CFA institutes go back, they review your ethics scores, and if you're ethically outstanding, which I'm sure you all are, they'll pass you on to the next level. Whereas if you're ethically questionable, then they will fail you. You will have no idea that that ever happened to you, okay? But ethics is used as, if you like, the kind of coin flip at the end if you're very close to that minimum passing score. Reserve the last month. I think minimum 1.5 months. I would say 2 do mock exams. There are 4 mock exams in the Schweser packages, 2 additional Schweser mocks that can be purchased, and you've got the institute mocks. Number of institute mocks tends to vary sitting to sitting, but it's between 1 and 3 mock exams. After the exam, do something fun. I'll tell you what you do after the exam: sleep. Okay, I had big plans. Oh, I was going to party hard after my CFA exams. Reality is, doing as it was back in when I did it, 2 3-hour papers. At the end of that, I was spent, so I had 1 beer and fell asleep. Okay, but certainly you'll be pleased by the time you get to the end of it. So let's talk about the Schweser material. Schweser products generally are designed to streamline your studies. Okay, so they are more condensed than the Institute's material. You can use them in conjunction with the Institute's material. Okay, so if you don't understand something in Schweser, then look it up in the Institute material. We have the Schweser study notes, which condense the CFA Institute's books. We have video series that back up those Schweser study notes. So if you're doing an example in the Schweser study notes and you don't explain it, you can click on the Schweser notes videos and get a detailed explanation of that on video. We have on-demand classes, we have online classes, live online classes, and we do have in-person instruction in certain countries around the world. We have our mock exams, of course. Our mock exams all include a prometric emulator, which mimics your exam day functionality. We have huge Q banks, and we never use any of our Q banks in multiple products. Any of our questions in multiple products. In other words, the questions you see in the Q bank are not the same as the questions you see in the mocks, are not the same as the questions you'd see on a review course, for example. Okay, so we have thousands of questions. I guarantee you will not run out of our questions. Print and online modalities. Yes, we have an app as well, meaning you can work when you're traveling, and you can download stuff on the app. You can do questions, watch videos on the app, and then it will resync to your learning management system when you're back on your computer. And we do have pass protection, which I'll delve into a little bit later. We have a learning management system, a series of online tools. This contains an activity feed with activities that you might want to be undertaking, like reading notes, watching videos, attending classes, and it prompts you when to do that. You can switch to calendar mode, so it comes up as a calendar of what to complete when. You can shift the topics around. So if you don't want to start with quantitative methods, which is study session 1, you can actually switch quant and economics, in which case then our task list will give you the economics tasks first. The Schweser notes, as I said, are the condensed versions of the Institute's material. We have the Schweser notes videos, which is the online companion to the Schweser notes. Okay, so remember, you can use those interchangeably, and a lot of candidates like to use those at the same time. Schweser Pro QBank, 5,000 plus questions at level 1. Okay, and we've got video debriefs within those questions there. We've got module quizzes that test you in a module. We break the syllabus down into modules, and they test you at the end of each module. Topic quizzes that test you at the topic level. What do I mean topic level? Quants, econ, equity, they're all deemed to be topics. Checkpoint exams that are exam standard papers that you can do essentially during your studies to see, are you on track? And 4 mock examinations using that prometric emulator. And as I said, the other thing that we include, the other thing that you can add on to your packages is 2 more mock exams. Interesting enough, actually, the CFA Institute does not have an exam emulator. Okay, quick sheet is just a laminated formula sheet so you can study in the shower. Right, okay, back to how to study. We say prepare, practice, perform. So the first 4 months, really from your start of your studies until you're 1 to 2 months out, then you're focusing on prepare and practice. It's all about understanding the material, that's the prepare part, and then reinforcing that understanding via question practice. And note, here's my split that I recommend to my candidates. 50% of your time on questions, 50% of your time looking at books, watching videos is about right. Okay, so what tools you've got? You've got the Schweser notes videos, the activity feed, which is the LMS with all of the learning management system with all the activities to complete. Worth doing in the CFA curriculum even if you're not going to study from the CFA Institute's materials, and I do get this question, you know, should I study from the CFA Institute materials or is Schweser enough? Well, we designed the study notes so they cover every single learning outcome statement. I studied using Schweser notes actually before I worked for the company, and I never saw anything at any 3 levels that I couldn't answer using the Schweser notes. I saw plenty that I wish I'd studied more for, okay, but I didn't see anything I couldn't answer. Nonetheless, even if you are studying purely using Schweser notes, and our official line is the Schweser notes are a supplement to the Institute's material. That's we have to say that because we're an approved prep provider by the CFA Institute. Okay, so you're not required to believe that's true. Now, CFA curriculum, we do say touch it though, because you want to do their blue box examples. These are the examples within chapters, and you must look at their end of chapter questions. People mistakenly think the end of chapter questions in the Institute material are written by their exam team, and they're not. They're written by their syllabus team, the guys that write the material, and the 2 are separate. But it does tell you what the CFA Institute think are important in each chapter. So certainly make sure you do those. If you want tuition, then we have on-demand classes, live, online, and in person. Okay, we've got the QBanks. Remember, QBanks, module quizzes, topic quizzes, checkpoint exams. And we've released this year Schweser Community, which is a series of online message boards, meaning if you're studying something at home and you don't understand it, or you want clarification, you can type it in the forum and you can get a tutor to answer that. And we turn those around within 24 hours. Big benefit compared to other forums that exist for the CFA is ours are essentially moderated by CFA charter holders, our actual own faculty, so people that really understand the solutions that you need. So we have that as well. Now, last 1 to 2 months, so we're getting very close to exam day now, then it's all about performance, all about getting ready for the exam, okay? So it's all about recall of material and developing your exam technique. Notice as well, key part of this is to use mock exams and then analyze your performance in those mock exams to work out where you're strong and your weak areas. You know, what areas am I hitting well on? What areas am I doing badly on? And if you find yourself doing badly on an area, then predominantly you should be building tests using the Schweser Pro QBank on that weak area that you've identified and trying to fix it via question practice. Typically, you don't need to go back to the books and videos unless you're reading a solution and you're thinking, I don't understand that solution, or that's news to me, because that's telling you you've got a knowledge gap and you need to fill that by going back to the books, videos, etc. But if you look at a solution to a question you got wrong and you think, yeah, stupid, well, you just need to practice additional questions. So debriefing everything you get wrong, okay, is absolutely vital to improvement in these last 2 months. You will see a huge upturn in performance in those final months. What tools do we have you to use during the review phase? Well, those 4 Schweser mock exams plus the 2 additional mocks that you can add on. The CFA mock exams, as I said, make sure you do those. Our online QBanks, we run review course, which are a blend of exam technique, refreshing topics and drilling down on question technique. And we have those on demand, live, online, and in person. Secret Sauce is a very small book that condenses the must-knows of the CFA syllabus. Candidates seem to love that. And of course, our online forums. Okay, I'm almost there, you'll be pleased to know. Last slide, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. Pass protection. Okay, so as I said, it's difficult to pass those exams. Very few people pass them all first time. Okay, so failing 2 exams en route is the norm. Now, if you need a second chance to pass the exam, we will pay for your entire package. In other words, we will, whatever package you bought for this sitting, we will replicate for the next sitting, but there are some qualifications on this. You had to buy one of our Essential, Premium, or Premium Plus packages, and you've got to answer at least 50% of all available online questions on the online platform. Basically, what we're saying there is, look, if you do this, we know that you were committed to your studies. And if you're committed to your studies, we are committed to you. Okay, that is it from me in terms of trying to give you some exam tips. Short period of time to try and answer all of these questions. So now over to you guys, if you've got any questions that you would like to ask me regarding the CFA examinations.
This one's from Hugo. How much does it cost to resit for the exam?
Well, the CFA Institute's fees, they will charge you that exam entry fee. So again, it's $700 for early and $1,000 for standard. Okay, and remember, those are going up to $900 and $1,200. And here's a little bit of a kicker here. If you fail an exam, by the time you get your results, typically the early registration date's gone. So you're likely to be paying the $1,000 to $1,200, unless you want to push it out for more than 6 months, which of course you can do at level 1.
Okay, we have another one here from Gildas. Is reading the book better than watching the videos?
Really depends on you. For me, it was about book reading. That's just how I studied book reading and then immediately hitting questions. A lot of people prefer to watch videos, but it depends. You know, if you're going to watch the videos, can you concentrate on the videos? You know whether you kind of gaze or you start to, gaze into the distance and stop listening. So really, that's why we have both the Schweser Notes videos and the Schweser Notes themselves to allow you to flex your studies depending on whether you want video, whether you want the books. They're interchangeable, they use the same examples. The on-demand classes are slightly different. On-demand classes use different examples to the ones that you'll see in the Schweser Notes. They are very much like attending a classroom, so it really is more of a kind of journey through the material, whereas the Schweser Notes videos are like the Schweser Notes. In other words, they go learning outcome statement by learning outcome statement. And I would say actually a lot of candidates like to use the Schweser Notes and have the Schweser Notes videos running at the same time. I don't mind what you do, as long as you do the question practice from day one. From day one, 50% of your time on question practice, that's the key.
Okay, I don't think there's any more questions right now. So that concludes our event for today. We hope you all enjoyed the content and thank you for attending the CFA program information session. Special thanks to our speaker, Jonathan Bone, and to the crew working behind the scenes, Kieran, Jack, and Jim. As a reminder for everyone, we will share a recording of today's event via email, and please contact us directly if you have any lingering questions about the CFA program or Kaplan Schweser. Thank you again for your time today, and we wish you the best of luck as you begin or continue your journey with the CFA program and Kaplan Schweser. I hope you each have a wonderful rest of your day. Goodbye.